Detroit Become Human is coming up very fast, and there's some stuff you need to know about it.
Hold on, just a little while long.
Hi folks, it's Falcon. Today on GameRanks, 10 things you need to know about Detroit Become Human. Number 10, the story is inspired by a short that was developed on the PS3 a number of years ago called Kara. It tended to be a short tech demo that writer and director David Cage decided he wanted to make into a full game just because he wanted to know what happened next. The story is about androids who are very much human, at least in appearance, and pretty much handle all of the menial labor. Clerks, nurses, janitors, etc. That's what the androids are for. The neo-noir story starts with an unexplained incident that causes some strange behaviors, creating deviant androids that show emotions. David Cage, the creator, took inspiration from Ray Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near, which is a non-fiction book about how human intelligence development is much slower than machine intelligence development. The game looks like it's intending to explore the area between android and human, dealing with artificial intelligence as an entity that will eventually overcome humanity, at least in intelligence. What will happen is the question. Number 9, Quantic Dream, the developer of the game, led by David Cage, developed an entirely new engine for Detroit Become Human. They wanted to advance features in rendering specifically, as this is a narrative game and depends heavily on your immersion in the story, script, and general emotion of all of the characters. That's what it's about. Androids developing emotion. So the more film-like the rendering can be, the better. They spent time on shading, dynamic lighting, and something that I think is rarely talked about, but camera physics, as well as effects like bokeh, which is the depth of field that blurs out the background and makes it appear more film-like. The word actually most specifically refers to lights blurred in the background and the effect that that generates, and it's something that they specifically worked on after Sony's Mark Cerny, who was the lead architect of the PlayStation 4, came in and evaluated their current effects. This was around 2016, and the engine actually handles pretty damn well at a 2160p checkerboard that's stable at 30 frames per second. The volumetric lighting is also better on the PS4 Pro, and to say the very least, it is going to be a pretty game. Number 8, the sheer number of characters is going to be quite wild. Casting for Detroit Become Human spanned Los Angeles, London, Great Britain, and Paris, France, hiring more than 250 actors to portray 513 different roles. There is not one specific protagonist either. There are 3 different protagonist characters, and there's no game over screen at any point. If any of the 3 playable characters die, the story just continues without them. Quantic Dream is claiming you can really change the outcome of the story based on the decisions you make and the actions you take. Obviously, this is a thing we've heard before in video games, but this is the Heavy Rain developer who did a pretty decent job at that, at least given the tech of the time. And really, regardless of how you can change the events of the game, I have a feeling it's all done at some level that it will at least be satisfying one way or the other. Still, I'm quite interested exactly mechanically how different you can make the game's ending. Number 7, dialogue is apparently going to be quite an ordeal in the game. Encounters have been labeled as quite huge, and all of the things that you find while investigating, while turning over stones on a crime scene, any new clue or detail that you investigate could potentially open up an entirely new branch and path in the story, because they're claiming a ton of these things will offer new dialogue choices. On top of that, a single dialogue choice or missed cue as far as something going on in the environment, something a character does, a twitch, a facial expression, can potentially kill a character.
You stay there. Don't you dare fucking move.
Alice! Daddy's very mad!
It looks as if this section of the game is going to be probably one of the more consequential, and that's quite interesting. Number 6, you are not stuck with your choices. Like a choose-your-own-adventure novel, if you're annoyed with something that you did, if you don't like the outcome, you're not stuck with it forever. I mean, you can't just rewind at any given time, but when the dialogue tree appears, you can change what happened and supposedly replay the segment. I have doubts that you'll be able to go back to previous segments, however. I don't know for sure, but we'll see. Supposedly, there is no right or wrong answer to anything. They don't intend to give you a good ending or a bad ending, but rather a lot of different endings. And even at the end of missions, you get a grid showing the alternatives available, which should be interesting to see exactly how that fits in with all the gameplay. Number 5, there are no game over screens. We mentioned it before, but it seems to merit a full point. Any of your main characters can die, and any of the 513 auxiliary characters can die, and the story just keeps going. It's meant to work more like real life, in which events, sure, they have consequences, but they don't just stop everything. Now, while that might seem like a little thing, can you imagine if Solid Snake died and the Shadow Moses incident just kept going and you just saw what happened? No, it's actually hard to imagine that because not many games do that. So whether or not that even ends up good, I lean towards it probably coming out good. They've spent a long time on this game. But one way or the other, it's commendable that they tried something like this. It's pretty ambitious. Number 4, you do have to think about the length of the game when you start throwing around the word ambitious. And I've seen numbers thrown around that say anything between 10 to 12, and I've also seen 8 to 10. Now, one way or another, this is a narrative-focused game that has tons of branching options, as well as details you can miss, a world you can immerse yourself in and just supposedly mine tiny little detail after tiny little detail, as well as have quite a bit of autonomy as to what you're doing. So that makes me think that it's about 8 to 10 hours long if you're just trying to get through the story. It seems like a game that, because of how it's created, will have a lot of replay value, which is something that honestly not a lot of games are really talking about anymore. We're seeing more games as a service that don't have replay value, they have just an endless loop that you play. So it's interesting to see them make a specific narrative game and think about stuff like how players can enjoy themselves upon returning to the game. In a narrative game, of course, it's narrative depth. Stuff you can miss, stuff you can go back to, new discoveries that you'll continue to have as you go back to the world of Detroit Become Human. So obviously there is a big hope associated with this, that it is not just good the first time around, but that we're going to go through this story a few times, trying to find the differences and intricacies. Number 3, there is a means to track your progress within the story in case you kind of get lost in the narrative and are trying to remember exactly the significance of a certain thing. This is the first time they've attempted to resolve this on account Quantic Dream does do this type of game, and people complain about the fact that they get lost fairly often. It's not a linear story, it's meant to deviate, and you're meant to remember things. So what they ended up doing was creating a new flowchart that you can access at any time by simply pausing the game and going to it. It tells you exactly what's going on, where you are, and all that, so if you leave it for a day or two because you're busy or whatever, you can come back to it and have information as to where you are. Usually it only takes something to jog your memory when I'm playing a game, and it seems like it's more than enough of that. It's a good effort on their part, I think. Number 2, there are things in the game that have an invisible timer. Now, it's not like Sonic the Hedgehog Drowning, where you're getting the terribly anxiety-inducing little tune with a countdown timer on screen, but the demo showed us that during the hostage negotiation, you have to do your investigation and figure out what happened in order to handle the negotiation. There's only a limited time where you can even do this, though, and then the SWAT team moves in. It's hard to believe that this would be the only time this exists in the whole game. Considering it has a script of about 2,000 or 3,000 pages, there will be most likely other situations in which there is some degree of pressure. And finally, number 1 is all the really, truly necessary information. For instance, Detroit Become Human is coming out on May 25th. That is getting very close. Quantic Dream isn't a first-party studio, but it's also not a third-party studio. They work specifically with Sony. They have a partnership with them. This is an exclusive that is being published by Sony, and it will probably work a similar way that God of War is, as somewhat of a system seller. When you develop a game specifically on one set of hardware, it always comes out better because you use that specific set of hardware hardware, not worrying about whether it would be compatible elsewhere. I know it's a bit less of a concern in this console generation, but you can still see the benefits of working with one set of hardware in all of the footage we've seen of this game. As I said previously, it is compatible with the PlayStation 4 Pro, but they have it working at 1080p, stable at 30 frames per second on the regular PS4, so it's not like it's gonna look bad there. It's probably gonna look pretty good on both. There are several versions of the game to order. For instance, there's a digital deluxe edition that you can buy. You get a digital art book along with it, some PS4 themes, and Heavy Rain on PS4 immediately the moment you order the game, which is cool because obviously Heavy Rain's a pretty good game. There's also no plans at the moment for DLC, but it's kind of a you never know type situation. But we know this for sure, there are no microtransactions in the game, so big thumbs up to that. What are you looking forward to most about Heavy Rain? What has you interested in the game in the first place? Let us know in the comments or in our Discord at discord.gg/gameranks. And hey, if you like this video, please click the like button. Now, if you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos all the time. The best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. And don't forget that notification bell, because that really makes you see the videos first. As for this video, thanks so much for watching. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanks.